Hello and welcome to the MyCAP office hours. It looks like we're just 1 minute after. Got a couple people here. I was thinking it might be kind of slow with being after the holiday and a lot of people are potentially on vacation. So give people a couple minutes to come in here. Well, we can get started. It's a couple minutes after. We just have a small group today, it looks like, which is kind of anticipated being the summer, beginning of the summer. People are on vacation, so maybe some people will be dripping in here and there. Sometimes I go through, I'm Peg Keogh. If you haven't been on before, I'm the Director of Education at CAP. So I am here to answer any and all of your questions that you might have. I seem to have a glare on my glasses. I'm in Seattle and it's very sunny today, so I have room darkening shades up. And so I'm getting a weird glare, so I apologize for that on my one. Hopefully that's not too distracting, but so I'm really here to answer any and all of your questions. Sometimes I have a little bit of a lecture that I go through, and then I just share. Last week, I talked all about the different types of student loans, just at a high level. So if that's something that's of interest to you, definitely go check that out. All of these are recorded and they're in the Academy. So if you're in your MyCAP account, let me show you what, let me just open up my sample here and I'll show you where the Academy is, which you might know since you're on office hours, and that's one of the ways to access it, but you might have signed up for this through a webinar. So not through a webinar, through an email invite that we sent out. So I will show you how to get in the Academy. So let me share my screen here. So this is your MyCAP dashboard. And when you're in here, just move the Zoom box around. Up here, it says Academy. That's the Academy. This is the community. So these are all recorded and this will be posted in the community tomorrow or the next day. Usually it's the day after. So you can go into the community and watch previous ones. So if you want to hear a high level overview of student loans, that's, I did that last week. So if people have questions, I'm more than happy to get into that again. If I have some parents of rising freshmen in college, which is exciting, then I'm happy to answer any of those questions. But that's how you get into the community, right up here on the white panel up here on your dashboard. So if you have any questions, and I see one, so I'm going to click on that in a minute, please post them in the Q&A as opposed to the chat, because the Q&A gets captured. So other people can see your questions and learn from them when they're watching the recording. I usually read them anyways. And you can put in a question anonymously if you so choose, if you don't want to have your name linked to it. So let me click. Oh, hi, Lisa. Thanks for saying hi. So it wasn't a question. Thank you. I feel like I have humans on the other end. Very nice to see everybody. So why don't you guys, tell me, you got any questions? I mean, this is really your forum to ask me questions. As I said, I talked about, and here's a question came in. Thank you, Lisa. I talked about student loans last week. So if that's something that's of interest, I'm happy to kind of talk through the different types of student loans as well. So here's one question regarding the FAFSA. So my sister, who is single, has me as co-owner of her savings account. Do I have to include that balance as my asset on the FAFSA? If so, should I have my sister change me to POD? Instead of co-owner, I'll be filling out the FAFSA in October 2023. Okay. So basically, if you are on any non-retirement accounts, so the specific answer to your question, Lisa, is yes. If on the registration for that savings account, it has your name and your sister's name, and the balance in that account is, for example, $10,000, then you would need to split that. So if she were submitting a FAFSA, she would put 5,000 as her asset, and you would put 5,000 as yours. So if you do change the registration so that you're not on it, like a transfer on death registration, then that's not your asset right now. So that would take you off of it. I don't know the reason why she has you on there. So one thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing anything around financial aid, you want to make sure that you don't do it like in a financial aid vacuum or silo, right? You want to look at, how does this affect financial aid? Are there any tax ramifications for it? And then some people do things for estate planning reasons. So you want to make sure that you don't make a decision around financial aid and then realize, oops, that wasn't good from a tax standpoint. So I don't know why your sister has you on there. That's a different conversation. But in straight answer to your question, yes, you would have to put that on there. Remember that you said you're not submitting the FAFSA until your first FAFSA until October of 2023. So that means you have a rising junior. So you don't need to do it anytime soon. Assets, the value of the assets when you're literally hitting submit on a financial aid form is what you're disclosing. So unlike the income that's a 2-year look back, assets are very, very current. So you have plenty of time to decide what you want to do with that account. Okay, so that's that answer. Okay, next question. In terms of financial aid, does it vary depending on if you are out of state? Yes. So if you're applying or your child is applying to a school that you're in state versus out of state, typically out-of-state public schools do not offer a lot of need-based aid, and depending on the school, merit aid to out-of-state kids. That doesn't mean that they never do. It just means that it's pretty rare. And let me share my MyCAP again, just to give you an example of how this is actually modeled in the software. Like if you look at my family, my sample family here, they have a federal EFC of 51,000. So UCLA would use that EFC to decide if they have need-based aid eligibility. And they do. I mean, they have $17,000 of aid, right? Because I'm just rounding it. If I round down to 68 or round up to 69,000 minus 51, there's 18,000 of need there, right? But you notice that in MyCAP, we are not projecting any need-based grants. And that's because UCLA for an out-of-state kid is not going to award need-based grants. They're just not. That's not how they, in general, if you're an out-of-state kid, unless your EFC is super low, and I'm talking $5,000-$6,000, they're not going to offer much need-based grants. And even if they do, it's not going to meet your need, right? So when you're looking in the information for the colleges, when you click on more info in here and you scroll down to financial aid and it shows percent of need met, this is a self-reported number by UCLA. So they're saying we meet 76% of need. So you could go to my example and multiply it out and say, well, it should be this. There's something wrong. Well, it isn't wrong. That's an average. And that includes the in-state California kids. So keep that in mind. We do have this built into CAP. So we are doing a very intentional job, our data team, of looking at colleges, going to their net price calculators and see how they handle out-of-state kids with different financial profiles, and we're modeling that into the software, okay? So that's an answer to the question around need-based aid for out-of-state. there's also merit aid, which is the non-need-based aid. And that all of these depend on the college, right? The need-based is more accurate across the board. I'm not going to tell you every school, but my generalization that I just shared is more accurate across the board. But definitely put the schools into CAP, because as we dial in the specific schools and how they handle out-of-state kids with need, it will get better and better on the projection. So definitely enter them in. But when it comes to merit aid, which is the non-need-based aid, there, I could make the generalization that most public out-of-state schools do not offer great merit to out-of-state kids. But that's definitely not true across the board, right? There are certain schools like University of Alabama, for example. They have a very robust program to attract out-of-state kids. And so they offer merit. And so they say before COVID, it was all linked to mostly the ACT, SAT. They've tweaked it some when kids were not taking it because of COVID and all the test optional stuff. But it was like, if you had this score, you get this amount of money. And I'm talking, I have a slide on one of my decks about it. It was a lot of money, $16,000 a year, $20,000 a year. So that's University of Alabama. They're intentionally trying to get out-of-state kids. My son went to Indiana University. He got $4,000 a year. If he had done a little better on his SAT, he could have gotten $9,000 a year of merit. University of New Mexico, I know off the top of my head, they give some nice merit to out-of-state kids. University of Northern Arizona. I'm outside of Seattle. I see a lot of families that I work with, they're getting merit. So not across the board. So that's something you want to do a little bit of research. You don't want to assume just because they're a state school and you're out of state that you're definitely not going to get any merit. For need-based aid, probably, but that's where you want to be leveraging the MyCAP tool. Again, let me show you this, because if we put in, let me see if I have a school like that I can show you. I can just put in, Indiana, and you'll be able to see, oops, I need to spell it right or it's not going to work. Yeah, the search is really specific. So just keep that in mind. You've got to get it right for it to find it. Just keep that in mind. Okay. So now let's go look for that. Let's go look at IU. So when you go into a school like this, and there's no need here, and it doesn't look like we're projecting merit, that's probably because the student that we are projecting a little merit, 1,000. But when we go down here, you can see it'll list all the merit scholarships that IU has. And then you want to go click on the caret, and it'll give you a little bit more data, like that's for national merit finalists. And I can't remember the name of the one my son got. It's been a few years, but I'm sure it's in here, right? So this is how you can see that. And if you want to, if your child takes a test and when you onboarded, the test you didn't have a score, up here in the profile, this is where you can always make updates. You go into personal info, you click edit, and then you can make updates to any of your onboarding information. So if the scores got better, then you go ahead and drag that over, you save it, and you come back out, and that should change IU, I would think. I'm just gonna do a refresh, see what it does here. I would think that would change it when we bumped it up. It doesn't seem to be changing it. But you can update, and it should give you the projected new one. The private schools, as a generalization, have more robust merit, right? But different schools do have merit aid. So just keep that in mind. As I've said before here and on webinars, I mean, the best answer I can give to a lot of questions is it depends, and it really does. So that's why you have this tool that you can use to see that. So hopefully that helps. We've just sold our apartment in New York City. We have a lot of unrealized equity. Our daughter goes to a private school and the school pays about half her tuition. Considering private schools count unrealized equity. So what, as income, is there a negative consequence to parking that equity in a savings account until we buy another apartment? So I think what you're saying is you sold your apartment, so you're sitting on a lot of cash, right? Because you got the proceeds, you had a lot of equity, so you sold it and you haven't bought anything. Colleges, the FAFSA schools, when you still owned your apartment and you were living in it, they did not ask about that apartment because that's your primary home. Now that you've sold it and you have cash, that's sitting in a and go ahead and write back if I'm not understanding correctly. Go ahead and write back in the Q&A and give me some clarification. But if you, I just talked to a family about this on a consult right before this. They sold their home and they're sitting on about $1 million sitting in an account, and they're going to buy a house, but they're going to move out of state and they're not buying the house right away. They want to get their son all settled in college. And so they're sitting on that, and we talk through it, and you can reach out to the college about that. Depending on when your child is going to school. Remember, I just said a few minutes ago that assets are assessed literally the day you submit your form. So if you're not going to, if you don't need to submit your form until November, if you're going to buy another home, which you didn't say in your question that you were, you said in a savings account until we buy another apartment. If you're going to buy another apartment and it works, remember, don't make decisions in a financial aid vacuum, but if it makes sense for you to buy another apartment and have, even if you haven't totally bought it, but you have a contract and it shows that you're spending the money on another apartment, if that works in your timeline to do that before you need to submit a FAFSA, then that's prudent to do that, because then you won't have to disclose that money. But if all the proceeds from your New York City apartment sale are sitting in your savings account, that's a non-retirement asset that you're required to disclose when they ask either checking and savings or net worth of investments. It's not in retirement, so you have to include that there. I don't know anything about your situation as far as your EFC and all that kind of stuff, and how much money it is and how much it matters. So if you wanted to get in the weeds on that, I would recommend that you book an hour with an expert, one of our experts, and you can do that. Let me show everybody right through the MyCAP software. You just go up here and it'll either say on your dashboard, depending on your situation, if you're in the free version, it'll say upgrade here. And then you can go pick valedictorian, which is our option to book a meeting, or if you've already booked a meeting, or you're in the upgraded platform called Scholar, like you can put in unlimited schools and you have advanced search, then it will say what mine does, book expert consultation. So you can always book there. But in answer to your question, yes, if that money's sitting in a savings account, you'll have to disclose it. I have tried through the years when I have families in this situation, when we're appealing, to say, hey, we're going to be buying another house. I've had one school that actually was like, all right, we'll take that into account. Most schools will not, especially if you can't prove that, hey, this money is spent. See the documentation, we're in contract, we're just going through inspection and, but this is the amount of money we're going to spend of that. And then they might be willing to take it off the table. Otherwise, they just have to take your word for it that at some point you're going to buy an apartment. And the other thing that I say all the time is you got to remember with these colleges that they'll work with you around some of this stuff, but what's best for your overall financial plan and your retirement picture is not what's first on their mind, right? They're trying to assess your ability to pay them. And most schools, if you've got some good things to share with them, they might pull that off the table. But they don't care if and when you retire, like I always say, right? It's not their job, and that's your job. And I'm a financial planner by background, which some of you might know if you've heard me before. So that's just something I always like to have parents keep in mind, right? You should have your retirement picture, and paying for college for one child or 2 kids or 3 kids, that should be part of your financial plan. And affordability and grabbing as much discounts, that's all part of it. So if I missed something on that question, just write back in the Q&A, and I think I got it there. Yeah. And she's a rising sophomore. So rising sophomore, you have plenty of time to figure that out. If that's referencing the selling your apartment, that money can sit there. You're not going to be filling out a financial aid form until, so October, this October is for rising senior. So it'll be 2024. So you've got a while to figure that out, what you want to do with that. And maybe you'll buy by then. Just so I could access your money if there is an emergency. Yeah. So Lisa, I think I hit that. Yeah. And basically half of it. But again, what I've been saying a couple times here now, you got to look at it, go into MyCAP, go into your profile, and, take that asset out and put it in and see how it affects your EFC. If it's not a lot of money, it's probably not going to affect it that much. Remember that non-retirement assets are assessed up to 5.64%. So if you've got $10,000, you do the math on that. So it depends. Like if she's sitting on $500,000 and your name is on half of it, then that's going to move the needle for you. So you want to look at how much it matters before you decide what, if you're going to make a change or not. But that should take care of that. So, okay. And also, if you change the registration to transfer on death and she has an emergency and she's, around, that could be a problem. So, it might be harder for you to access. I'm not an attorney, but there's different things that if she's incapacitated, that she can have legal documents set up so you can access stuff and make decisions for her and access funds. But depending on the age of your child, it might not be something, just like I said to the other question, you might not have to worry about it right now, because you might have some time before you're submitting a FAFSA. So yeah, so just keep that in mind. And if that doesn't make sense to anybody about financial aid forms, what I said, go ahead and chime in. But we have something called prior year. So the easiest way to think about it is there's 4 tax years they're going to ask about on the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And the first year, which I call the base year, the easiest way to figure out what that is think about when your child's going to go to school. If it's going to be in the fall, is it fall of 2023 or fall of 2024? Whatever it is, subtract 2, and that's your first tax year. What I call your base year. That's your first year. So if your child's going to school in 2024, your first tax year is 2022. So the 4 tax years they're going to ask about are 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. So that's how it works for income. Remember that if in any given year, say you're sitting in 2024 and you're answering questions, you need to provide income about 2022, and your situation is much worse in the current situation. And this happened with COVID, right? People a couple of years ago had to submit information about 2019 pre-COVID, and they're sitting there in 2021 and their business got shut down or they got laid off or whatever, right? And that's when you need to reach out to the college. You need to supply the information they ask, but then you need to reach out to the college and let them know. And they do something called exercise professional judgment. That's where they go in and they change numbers when you have to give them documentation, you have to have a conversation, but just keep that in mind. But like I said, so that's income. It's a little confusing because income is a 2-year look back, but assets are literally the day you hit submit. I don't know that everybody actually goes and looks up the exact value of their accounts the day they hit submit, but technically you can. And I tell people if the market was doing crazy stuff, and then there's been a down week, then go look at your accounts and see what it looks like versus your last statement that might be higher. So there's a lot of time to make changes and spend down funds. If you need to buy a new car, buy it before you hit, submit the FAFSA, that kind of thing, because every little bit can help. But again, plug the numbers into MyCAP and see how much it helps before you make your decisions. All right, here's another question. What are my chances of my child getting a private loan with no cosigner? She has worked part-time past 2 to 3 years and recently opened a credit card. Also, how long does it take to get approved or denied? Working 2 to 3 years part-time, if she's not going to have ongoing employment, I think it would be pretty difficult. I haven't seen, for undergrads, I haven't seen a lot of private loans without a cosigner. So I can't say for sure, and I don't have the numbers, but if she's worked part-time for the last 2 or 3 years and made, I don't know, I'm just making this up, $15,000 or $20,000. Having a credit card is great because she has a credit history, and that's really good, but they're looking for income and some sort of collateral, right? So assets, some sort of collateral and or income, so that they're limiting their risk. And it also depends on how much the loan is going to be for, right? So they look at all of that. I think it would be pretty difficult. Most private loans, there's a cosigner. Sometimes they have different specs in there that after so many on-time payments that there can be a release of cosigner, but most of the time there is. And what might be a good thing to do, Dawn, is if you have a bank that you have you've had accounts there for a while, you could go in and ask them, hey, do you do student loans? And just ask them, like, how would you look at this? Just get some information. You can also, let me show you in MyCAP. When you're on your dashboard here, you can scroll down to the bottom. And we have information about, this has all been updated and new, so it's great. One of my colleagues, Bill Rabbit's done a lot of work on this, getting this all updated. But you can go to this third tab, compare private student loan rates, and you can go in here and put in the school, whatever, like I'll put in a school, and then it'll come up on the search here, and then hit view loans, and then it'll show you, and this will at least give you some names, and you can apply through this. But what I would do if I were you, if you wanted to ask them, is maybe see if you could Google, and I don't know if it's possible to talk to these guys, but this can give you an idea of rates. But if you have her go in and submit just based on hers, but I would be surprised, but I could easily be wrong. I have been wrong, I will admit it. But I would do a little research. But at least here, when you do that, you can see the different lenders for that university that are coming up in our search. But for everybody else too, this is a good place if you're looking at private loans, which may or may not be a good source for you. People with really good credit scores, this can sometimes produce, some of the best interest rates after the direct federal student loan for your child. But this is a great resource, and we've got it right here in MyCAP. But I was just saying, Dawn, that would give you an idea of lenders that are lending through that school. But anyways, the direct student loan, which I'm assuming all your child needs to do is submit the FAFSA. You guys submit the FAFSA. That is only in the student's name. So there is no cosigner on that one. And then the parent plus loan, which they now call just the plus loan, that's a federal loan as well. That's only one parent. So then the parent's completely on the hook for it. Even though you could have an agreement with your child to pay it, they're not on the hook for it. So hopefully that answers that question. My answer would be, how long does it take to get approved or denied? It usually, in my experience with families, it doesn't take that long. It might take up to a week. The parent loan is very quick, very quick. But we do recommend, if you're thinking about taking out loans, you want to get that locked in pretty soon. You want to see what all your options are, right? between a parent loan, between potentially a state loan, if your state has a program, or if your state has a program, or if the state where your child is going to college has a program. So for example, the state of Rhode Island has a program that any student can try and get loans at. It doesn't matter if you live there or you're going to school there. They just happen to, that happens to be their program. The state of Massachusetts has a program. And if you're a Massachusetts kid, or you're coming to Massachusetts and going to a school in the state, you're eligible. So if you're looking at loans and you have a rising senior, which I'm based on your question, I mean, rising freshman in college, I'm guessing based on your questions, you do. You want to get that dialed in. But I tell people, depending on your situation, I mean, this is usually people book an hour to talk through the specifics of their situation. And if you caught our webinar that Matt and I have done a few of them, how to borrow, we went through all the pros and cons of that. So hopefully you were on that and you're well versed. But there's not one answer. It kind of depends what matters to you. It depends on your credit score, but there's the direct student loans that are all your child, the private loans where you're probably going to be co-signing, but even with what you're sharing in your question, but maybe not. I don't know how much money your child has, but if they're no longer working, then they don't have that income. So that's one thing to think about. And then there's the Parent Plus loans and there's the state loans. Those are the biggies. So that's that. All right, I don't see any more questions. I do see one thing popped up in the chat. Can you refer a real estate accountant in the Seattle suburban area? Real estate. Can you just type a little more about what you mean by that? Because is that I don't know any accountants that only specialize in real estate. I don't know exactly what you're looking for. I don't use an accountant, and I had a guy that I used to refer to, and he's in the process of selling his business. So he's still there, but he's got two partners that I don't know super well. And I don't just that the accountant is familiar with someone that owns two properties. Oh, I think most accountants that have been around the block, that's not a problem. Yeah. I can here, I'll type in the chat who and they're located in Bellevue. Okay, so I just typed it. Oh, I just typed it just to the hosts and panelists. That's not going to help you. Here, let me type this into here, I'll type it back to you. Okay, I typed you the name and they're in Bellevue, but just to share, like I said, he is still, Dennis Goldstein is who I know well. He's still there, but he's not gone, but he is going to be retiring at some point, and he has two people that he's partnering with for the transition. And I don't know where they're at with that specifically. So if you reach out and say, Peg Keogh, I'd like to chat with Dennis about being a new client. Peg Keogh referred me. I mean, I've known him for years when I was in the financial planning, asset management world. Very smart accountant, but they might have you meet with one of the other two people, which I'm not, they're fine. I just don't know them very well. So I can't really recommend them. So that's a long-winded answer to that. Okay, that's that. What else you guys got for me? Let me see. I don't see any other questions. Happy to answer anything else. I gave a little bit of a high-level overview. Definitely keep watch of your emails. You all should be getting emails from us. And when we're going to be doing a webinar later this month, kind of on financial aid 101 and talking a little bit about the FAFSA Simplification Act that's going to kick in, not for this coming FAFSA, but if you have a rising junior, that's going to be your new normal, the rules of the FAFSA Simplification Act. So it's going to kick in on the October 1, 2023 FAFSA. So just keep that in mind. Just hold on one second. I'm just going to close my office here. I'm just going to close my office door real quick. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. There was just somebody grabbed a phone call and it was kind of loud. I didn't know if it was disruptive to you guys. So just keep that in mind that that's coming up, but we'll be doing a webinar where we'll be talking about all things financial aid, and we'll also hit on that. So keep an eye out for your email. We'll be sending out an invite. We'll also be doing more of those in the fall. So if for some reason you're out of town, and remember, when we do webinars, and it should say it on the invite, we always record it and we always send out the recording and the slides. So even I do this all the time personally, when a webinar comes up that I know I can't make, I still register for it if I'm interested in it, because then I can listen to the recording at my convenience. So keep that in mind. If you can't make it live, don't worry about that. Okay. Another question here. Do you know whether males age 18 still have to register with Selective Service? They do not. That change actually went into effect last year. That was one of the changes they put into effect almost right away after passing it. I don't know if exactly, yeah, but it is, the answer is no. That is no longer a requirement. That was effective definitely with the last FAFSA, maybe even before that, I can't remember. For some reason, they didn't wait on that one, because when they first passed the legislation, it was going to take effect on the 23-24 school year, which would have been the FAFSA that's coming up this fall. And then the Department of Ed kicked it down the road a year, because I think they saw all the changes that they were going to have to figure out how to implement, and they needed a little bit more time. So that question, for people that don't understand the question, there used to be a requirement to submit the FAFSA if you were a male and you were 18 or over, and you had to register for the Selective Service to submit the FAFSA. So there was a question asking if you hadn't, it would take you to a page to do it. So no, that is no longer a question, but males still have to register for federal law purposes. That I don't know. That I am not sure. If you're required to register for that, we don't obviously have a draft right now. So I do not know if for federal law purposes you have to do that. That's outside of financial aid. When my son was going through it, we had to register, so we did. So, all right. Anything else? This is your chance. We got 20 minutes left. I'm happy to answer anything anybody's got here. All right. Well, our next office hours will be on July 25th, so 2 weeks from now. We are looking into once in a while having guests come on with me, or if somebody else is doing it. I should be here on the 25th. I will not be here on the first one in August because I will be out of the office. But yeah, we are talking to one woman about maybe popping on and being a guest. It will be somebody who has an expertise outside of the financial that we think, might be helpful for parents to hear from. So keep tuned in on that. When we send the reminders, we'll put it in there. We'll say, hey, we're going to have this guest, so that you'll know. And if that's of interest to you, you can hop on live, especially if you want to ask questions. But just like, I think, I mentioned at the beginning, these are all recorded and put in. The only downside of not being on live is if you have a specific question you want to ask. Obviously, you can't ask it when you're watching a recording, but remember, the other place you can ask questions, and let me just share my screen and then we can wrap up, is in the community. So up here where it says community, you can always go in there. So think of that. It's kind of like a, people create private Facebook groups. This is like a private CAP group, but it's online. So you can go on and submit a question, and we're notified. The different college planning experts at CAP are notified when somebody posts, and then we'll go on and answer your question. So these are the kind of questions you would ask during office hours, but if you don't make office hours or you have a question right after office hours was held, you can always do that. If it's an in-depth question about your specific situation, then, we'll let you know about that. And then it's probably better to book a meeting. But most of the questions people ask on here, I'm totally able to answer, and it's not a problem at all. That's why we're here. So, yeah, so stay tuned, and I hope everybody's summer is off to a great start. I hope everybody had a good 4th. I did. The weather was nice in Seattle, which is huge. It usually gets nice this time of year. So I know there might be a couple Seattle people here. So we're enjoying our nice weather. So hopefully the rest of you are as well, and everybody's staying well. And just wait one more minute. If we don't have any more questions, then I will see everybody next time, and have a wonderful week. All right. Take care, everybody.